Returning again to games that I really like and feel you should give a try, we find Soul. Yeah, Soul, not SOVL. The V is apparently a joke by the creator. Soul simply plays as perhaps the closest and cheapest thing that you'll find to a battle report from Warhammer Fantasy. Best of all, it's free, which is already a huge plus, especially if you're anyone who's familiar with tabletop games and in particular the Games Workshop games. Now, within Soul, you play as what you would consider just standard fantasy fare. Orcs, goblins, elves, humans, the undead, dwarves. There are additional DLC offering ratmen, wood elves, goatmen, lizardmen, and chaos, or they're known as the Abyssal. If it's not already clear that this game is proudly wearing its Warhammer influence, then the DLCs will make this completely apparent. With the game being free, it's incredibly worth just giving it a go. And I'll even put a link down below in the video so you can give it a look. Each of the DLCs are reasonably priced and provide a decent amount of content, so on the whole I feel like it's a good occasion for try the game, see what you think, and if you like it, support the creator through DLC. Onto the game itself, it's about what you would expect. Blocks of units move towards each other at a limited movement depending on unit type, then engage in a series of actions: charge, movement, action and rally, followed by attack and defense rolls, and the resultant success or failure of an engagement leading to either fleeing or crumbling, all things that you'll be familiar with if you've played tabletop gaming. Starting a game, you'll choose a faction, and then a leader of that faction, then 2 units that act as your army around the leader's retinue. Within your army, the character will have its own kind of unique little unit, which is different depending on the type of unit you've chosen. Certain leaders might have siege units, others may have ranged units, others may have melee or cavalry, depending on the kind of character that you've chosen. Once you've picked all of this, you'll enter a persistent roguelike map similar to something like Slay the Spire, with various options for battles, rest points, shops and random events, including boss battles, which are essentially just fighting somewhat harder enemies. Whilst the battle report style combat could get a little old with the random chance of the map, it adds a lot more to gameplay. One session I'll be playing as an all melee elven army, marching on the undead, only for the next campaign to end up being offered 3 siege engines and starting every battle by bombarding the enemy in a far corner and attempting to avoid any kind of direct combat or charge, no matter what they throw at me. It's a fairly limited series of decisions that you make on this roguelike map, but it's enough that it feels like you're picking your future as opposed to just simply having RNG decide it for you. You'll get a fair amount of options and a fair amount of chances to take risks to significantly boost your characters. Sometimes those risks will backfire and your characters will be weaker or you'll take more damage, and sometimes they'll greatly benefit you. But there's enough diversity in what's going on that you really feel like the things you're doing have a momentum that is building the further and further you get into the campaign. Now, the game is not technically in early access, at least anywhere that I can visually see on Steam, but I would still describe it as such. There are some small bugs, there are nothing that's ever really impacted me personally, and though there are only 2 persistent map levels of the roguelike area, a 3rd would be welcome. Multiplayer is available, but for me, the draw was really in the roguelike campaign. Don't get me wrong, there are many different layered battle maps, different versions of cities, forests, swamps, areas to play the actual combat side of the game in, but when it comes to the Slay the Spire type little maps that you cobble together, there is, as I've said, only 2 and the pathways are fairly limited. Whilst in Slay the Spire you feel like you have 3 direct paths that kind of differ quite greatly in what they're doing, I would say in Soul that you really only have 2 paths at any real time, and oftentimes there's a lot of similarity in what the paths offer you. It's enough to be interesting, but it's also something that could be greatly expanded upon. There could be more diversity, there could be more things that are added, but there's time. On the whole, the game feels complete and fun. Could more be added? Yes, and I really hope they continue to expand upon it, perhaps adding other styles of campaign, or city maps that you can defend, placeable defender objects in the siege scenario, or simply just more commanders, more units. The game is relatively simple, and in of that, it's brilliant. If you have a paltry understanding of how tabletop wargaming works, you will leap at this game and run at it. If you don't, well, after about 10 minutes, you'll understand everything anyway. It's really easy to pick up and hard to put down. Despite the relatively short nature of matches, I've already put around 24 hours into the game, and I'm considering buying its DLC just to support the creator. There really isn't that much more to say. Soul is SOVL. It's likely Marmite. You're either going to really love this or you're going to hate it, and know within a few minutes. But at the price point of free, it's really just worth trying and worth suggesting to your friends if you do like it. In terms of a feature-complete game, this feels like this is it. It's very clear that the creator of this game really likes the influence that this has come from. It bleeds fantasy. If I didn't know that it was Warhammer Fantasy, I could argue that it's taking influence from various different books or movies with these kinds of creatures in. It does the visualization of it well. The different units, despite being blocks on something like Time Commanders, feel different enough that each unit has its own kind of unique flavour in how you position them. The movement is basic, but various little terrain additions like cliffs, rivers, and trees and forests are enough to make battle maps feel diverse. Playing on a city is different from playing in a forest. Playing in a desert biome is different from playing in a swamp. There is not a lot there, but enough that each time I load up a map, I'm thinking of a different scenario, of a different engagement line, as opposed to the one I was playing before. As I said earlier, if I start with all siege engines, I am now considering what melee I will be getting to block off the impending charge. If I start with all melee, then I'm considering maybe getting some cavalry, or some archers, or some siege. If I'm offered an additional leader, I may take that because of the boost later in the game of how good they could be, but is it worth paying 200 gold for a leader who might not be that good early on? It's hard to say. There are enough decisions that everything kind of feels fresh. And that is not to say that each faction in of itself plays somewhat differently. Then, in a further layer behind that, the leaders of each faction play differently as well. You'll have mages or knights, guard captains versus rangers. Each kind of sets you up for a different style of early game. There are some which are definitely significantly stronger, I will say. Starting with any kind of heavy shock cavalry does make things a lot easier. Starting with ranged can be good, I would say, but sometimes you'll just miss those early shots, and the moment melee starts, you guys are just going to die. That's how it goes. On the whole, critique of this game really just continually comes back to price point. For a game that is free, you can't argue against it. It's a good, solid game, enough time that you could get 2 hours out of, which would usually be the cutoff for a paid game on Steam, and then some. The DLCs are reasonably cheap, and I'll show the total cost price of each of the DLCs towards the end of the video before closing out. But really, they should be seen as more content that you can add for a relatively cheap price, and even if you were to get the entire bundle of factions and leaders offered there, it would still come out as cheaper than most modern games today and several indie games. It's just a good deal. Nothing more to really be said about it. Now, I'm definitely cutting up aspects of the game in front of you. I can't show you the full video of how much I played of Soul just to kind of make this video. That in of itself took around 30 minutes to an hour just to really play a single map and then get onto the second map. But if you do enjoy this, I would say just download the game. It's not particularly intensive on your PC, it doesn't take much room, and again, it's free. Give it a go. See what you think. If you don't like it, at the end of the day, you can always just uninstall it and nothing will have changed. But that's the video. I've been Caitlyn. Let me know what you think. I'd be interested in seeing what others think of this game, particularly if you're a Warhammer veteran. I would wonder how successfully this manages to paint the fantasy of tabletop games and battle reports into a sort of digital space. I myself never really got to play Warhammer Fantasy. I've had limited games of 40k myself, so I'd be interested to see what veterans of tabletop gaming really think about this. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. We'll probably be doing something a little bit more around D&D, or maybe another review for Final Fantasy. See you then.